I have a point of personal privilege before I start my questioning. I want you to know that Senator Johnson and I were accused of spreading Russian disinformation for 2.5 years, and everybody now knows that we were not spreading Russian disinformation on an investigation that we were doing. Dr. Pelkey, you were fired from your position at 538. WikiLeaks later revealed an explicit campaign against you. The editor of Think Progress, a website that's part of the lobbying arm of a far left-wing Center for American Progress, wrote the following in an email to billionaire dark money Democrat donor Tom Steyer. Quote, I think it's fair to say that without Climate Progress, the environmental arm of Think Progress, Pelkey would still be writing on climate change for 538. Why do you believe you were fired from 538 and smeared in the media?
Yeah, thank you. I had written a piece. I was hired by Nate Silver to write for 538, and since climate change was so contested, I said, well, if you let me write something about sports, I'll also write about climate change. My first piece was to summarize an IPCC report. In 2012, the IPCC released a report, a special report on extreme events. And it was straight up IPCC consensus science that I wrote about. What I said in that piece was that disaster costs are increasing, but they're increasing because we have more stuff, more property, more buildings in harm's way. That's what the IPCC concluded. There was an organized campaign released years later, and you never know where you'll find yourself. I was in the WikiLeaks. And it was organized by Center for American Progress along with a climate scientist named Michael Mann. And they were very explicit why they wanted me to be removed. My message, even though it was on consensus science, was not politically comfortable or acceptable. So it was a very clear reason why I was attacked. My only regret is that the editors at 538 didn't stand firm and say we're going to support strong science.
Mr. Walter, witnesses called to testify before this committee this year by the majority work for organizations that have received dark money from Arabella advisors. The president of the Niskanen Center even admitted on the record to receiving funding from anonymous donors in the past, but in 10 climate hearings, Democrats have never asked a single one of their witnesses about their receipts of dark money, let alone attempted to impugn the integrity or accuse them of conspiracy. Why do you think that is, and how does Arabella advisors influence Democratic legislators, and why is the Democratic dark money conveniently ignored by the left?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I can't explain exactly why your colleagues aren't willing to look at the dark money ties of their own witnesses, because, of course, they're very extensive, and influencewatch.org, our website, will provide lots of information on that. Arabella is a stunningly powerful. It affects the executive branch, it affects regulations, it affects legislation, with, as I said, billions of dollars a year, some of it from foreign donors. Now, one of my favorite examples of this would be that almost the entire Biden regulatory agenda has been shaped by an especially dark bit of Arabella called Governing for Impact. Interestingly, that has ties to a witness that appeared at the last hearing where I had the honor of testifying to Chairman Whitehouse.
Are any Democratic witnesses on this panel linked to the web of liberal dark money donations?
Yes, just today you have a witness, for instance, who spent years at the group called CREW, which is tied to the dark money of Empire of David Brock and other dark money. You have a witness who's connected to a nonprofit that receives money from the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, which is one of the donors tied up in the Arabella network.
Dr. Orzesky, the environmental law firm Scher Edling receives funding by way of the Resource Legal Fund and the Arabella Advisors New Adventure Fund from foreign and domestic elites to promote progressive climate policies. Democratic dark money giant George Soros and Leonardo DiCaprio are among their donors. Are you currently or have you ever been retained by the environmental law firm Scher Edling?
Yes, I have, and I welcome the opportunity to talk about the case that I consulted on, San Mateo versus Chevron, where the people of San Mateo County have sued for redress because of the damages that that county and the state of California is experiencing from sea level rise caused by climate change caused by their product, oil and gas.
My time's up. Thank you.
Senator Stabenow.
Well, thank you. Good morning, and thank you very much for this really important hearing. I'd like to just do a little history lesson, Mr. Chairman, and take you back over 100 years ago when Henry Ford and Thomas Edison were building the first automobile, and they wanted to build an affordable electric car. And in 1914, there was an article in the New York Times where they were lamenting the fact that they had challenges developing a battery with enough range. That sounds familiar. Unfortunately, at the same time, in Texas, they were developing oil fields. And we saw just 2 years after this article, Congress passed a change in the tax law to, in effect, provide oil companies interest-free loans. It was the first fossil fuel subsidy. Our colleagues on the other side of the aisle, for those of us that work on battery and solar and wind and other clean energies, say we shouldn't pick winners and losers. Mr. Chairman, over 100 years ago, we picked a winner and they won for 100 years. And so now we move and we look at the fact that it's no surprise that Henry Ford chose to focus on the technology of the time and developed the internal combustion engine. Now, it's true that my home state of Michigan has benefited from these choices. We put the world on wheels. We are extremely proud of our place in history as we move now to cleaner technologies as well. But I would also say, wouldn't it have been better if we had understood the issues of carbon pollution at the very beginning and had built that in to what was happening? Imagine the difference. Just imagine if we had incentives at the very beginning for battery technology instead of the first fossil fuel subsidy. And imagine if the oil and gas industry had not used their profits in basically every resource to stop efforts to recognize and end carbon pollution or even acknowledge it. Imagine if all of this, Mr. Chairman, had gone into technologies to stop carbon pollution, methane pollution, other greenhouse gases. Imagine what a different world we would have today if all this dark money had gone into a cleaner environment and supporting the realities of science. So the reality is that the climate is changing. We have a climate crisis hitting us over the head every day. I chair the Agriculture Committee. You can't talk to a farmer now that does not acknowledge what is happening. And their long-time efforts and overwhelming financial influence using dark money has cost us precious, precious time. Just last week, we had hail the size of golf balls destroying farms and homes in the small town of Howell, Michigan. And there's story after story of wildfire smoke coming at us, droughts and floods and everything else. And you can tally the total cost in terms of dollars, or you can tally it in terms of lives. Both are at historic levels in terms of loss. In the 2022 saw 18 separate billion-dollar weather and climate disasters inflicting $175 million in damages and costing 475 people their lives. So, Dr. Oreskes, in your testimony, you talk about these real costs. Can you talk a little bit more about the price everyday folks have to pay for this inaction? I would argue 100 years of inaction on the climate crisis. And can you talk a little bit more about the tactics big oil has been using that has created this situation?
Well, thank you for that question. I'm not an economist, but I do follow the work of my economic colleagues, and we have numerous studies now. This is an area where the science really has advanced and changed dramatically in the last 20 years. Most of the basic science of climate change really hasn't changed that much. in the 20 years I've been working on this issue, but the economic analyses and the detection and attribution studies have. So detection and attribution, sometimes called D&A, not DNA, but DNA, refers to analyses that try to answer the question, would this have happened but for climate change, or would it have been as bad? And there have been major advances in that, and we now have scores and scores of scientific studies that prove beyond any reasonable doubt that numerous extreme weather events, floods, wildfires, hurricanes, droughts, hailstorms, they're harder, they're trickier, but almost certainly hailstorms as well, maybe tornadoes, those are scientifically tricky, but that many, many of these events have become worse, and in some cases so much worse that scientists could say, as they did about the heat dome, that this would not have happened but for climate change. And as you know, billions of dollars in losses from hurricanes, floods, extreme precipitation events. NOAA tracks these data. I don't have them with me, but I could easily find them. We've seen huge increases, and with all due respect to my good colleague Roger, who I've known for many years, Roger's point about people moving to coastal area is not wrong, but it's incomplete. Because yes, there is more damage in coastal areas because more people live there. But in addition, sea level is rising because of climate change. Storm surge has become worse because of climate change. Hurricanes and extreme precipitation. And these cost billions of dollars to the American people, to insurers, to reinsurers, and to the federal government because of federal disaster relief. So yes, this is extremely costly, and yes, it is caused by climate change. And the point of my testimony was to say, we have known this science for a long, long time. And so if we ask the question, why haven't we acted on this very robust body of rich, deep, sophisticated scientific knowledge? A big part of the answer, it's not the only, but a big part of the answer is because the way the fossil fuel industry and its allies have deliberately set out to undermine our confidence in the science and to make us think that the science wasn't strong enough to warrant action.
Tình ta mến nhau, nhiều đêm ngắm sao mơ ước xin mình bền lâu, suốt đời tình khắc sâu. Nhớ thương đầy vơi mộng thấy ai mỉm cười, làn môi xinh tuyệt vời, để rồi buồn ơi ánh trăng soi còn đó, và nghe hơi gió biết rằng mình vừa mơ. Khi yêu hôn như nở hoa say mộng tuyệt vời, nắm tương lai trong bàn tay, một câu nói thôi. Đôi khi gặp nhau muốn khơi nhưng rồi lại thôi, nói ra e ngại mặc theo gió trôi. Hôm nay nhìn xe kết hoa rồi ngược nẻo đường, gửi thư trao cho người yêu vài câu luyến thương. Hân hoan hồn như nở hoa trông chờ hồi âm, đắng cay trong lòng chỉ thấy thiếp hồng. Chiều tím không mây, đường cũ bước lần về, buồn nghe say dứt tim. Nhìn xe kết hoa màu trắng, ngỡ rằng mình mơ, pháo hồng nhuộm tiễn đưa. Lá thu chậm rơi, từng lá nghe ai tìm về, mở rộng vòng tay đón anh nhưng nào thấy sầu dâng lên tim biết bao giờ cho khô. chẳng ngỡ rằng mình mơ pháo hồng nhuộm tiễn đưa. Lá thu chậm rơi từng lá nghe buồn buồn, từng bước ai tìm về mở rộng vòng tay đón anh nhưng nào thấy sầu dâng lên tim biết bao giờ cho khô. Mở rộng vòng tay đón anh nhưng nào thấy sầu dâng